You are listening to the I Choose My Best Life podcast with Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a show that is dedicated to helping you live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally. For additional resources, visit ichoosemybestlife.com.
If you are feeling overwhelmed and in need of a break, I want to invite you on an experience like no other. This is our very first Rest and Renew cruise. It is happening January 16th through the 20th, 2025, aboard a luxurious, beautiful ship with Royal Caribbean. Imagine yourself sailing through turquoise waters with nothing but relaxation on the schedule. This isn't just a vacation. This is a water-bound rest retreat where you get an opportunity to reclaim your peace, enjoy worship sessions, inspiring workshops, and the delicious cuisine and locations that you'll experience on our adventure together. You get to indulge in some restorative activities based on the type of rest that you personally need to restore your body, mind, and spirit. Spaces are limited, so make sure you book your cabin now. You get the opportunity to choose if you want to have a private room or if you want to have a double room and share with your friends. We have all of this set up within our online system so you can secure your spot today before we close down registration on September 1st, 2024. So to get signed up, check out the link that is over in the show notes. And I can't wait to see you on the Rest and Renew cruise. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Saundra, and you're listening to I Choose My Best Life. Today, we're going to be chatting about choose home. What does that mean, and how do you do it? And I have with me today Anna McLaughlin, and she is going to really give us a little bit of her story, which I think a lot of you will find interesting. And that I think many of us, we begin careers in certain areas. Maybe it doesn't live up to exactly the thing we feel like God is calling us to. How do you transition? How do you decide which way to go and what you need to do? And how do you get to a place where things feel like home, where you feel as if you're walking in the fullness of what God has called you to, and in the process, honoring and serving your family and your larger community. Anna, I want to thank you so much for joining me and give you a little bit of a moment to share some of your backstory.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Saundra. I really appreciate it. So, a little bit about my story. I was raised in a home that really encouraged us to excel in all of the ways that the world would deem excelling. So, I worked hard to get the best grades, to go to the best schools, and found myself in a career as a corporate lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions with a huge law firm. Went to one of the top 20 law schools. So it seemed like a rival by the world standards, but I found myself so lost in this life that I had worked so hard to build. So in my mid-20s, I really had this reckoning of here I am in this career that actually, by all intents and purposes, was not only successful, but could have been happy. It was a good law firm. They cared about balance. And yet, during that process, I fell in love with my husband now, who was a former C student, didn't own any books when we got together. And I remember looking at him as we started our love story going, he's happy. I'm not happy, but he's so happy and content in his life that he's built that was really directed by who am I? How can I serve well? What is it that I feel called to do in my life that I would enjoy? And how can I leave room for the people that I love most? And having asked none of those questions when I started out, but rather starting with the question, what am I able to do well? I'd ended in the completely wrong spot. So my arc in my 20s and 30s was really dismantling the house of cards that that I had built up to that time, and instead saying, what is true purpose? What is true fulfillment?
I can definitely relate to your story because for myself, I feel like there were many years where there is this divide between the work I did on a regular basis and some of the things I felt called to do, and really trying to find, as you mentioned, that happy place where all of it works together, where you're able to be authentic, where you're able to have joy and satisfaction and realize that your work is having a deeper meaning than just the things you're producing. I love also in the fact that you put a really big focus on serving your family. You brought it close before you then allowed God to birth it further out into community. And part of that included homeschooling. How did
That's
you
right.
come about that decision to step away from a career that you had spent a lawyer, you're in school forever,
Yeah.
after being in school forever, to step away from that and then to pull it in closer to really start focusing on family first before you started branching out?
Oh, I love what you said of starting with family first. And I think really the rubber met the road for us in realizing that we were actively building other people's dreams and we were sacrificing our own closest to home and that nobody else could do that but us. So I was a lawyer for the first 3 or 4 years of our marriage. We had a daughter during that time. And I'd get the photographs from my mother who was keeping her of all the cute, fun things that she was doing. And, oh, she's learning this new word. And now we're planting in the garden. And it was almost physically painful to be away from that and to be missing it. And I think in my larger circle, that loss was acknowledged, but there was this kind of self-actualization was the goal that was held out as the ideal of, oh, you have to have your own thing and you have to have your own purpose. But I realized I wasn't building my own purpose. My purpose, my heart was to sow into my family and to love them well. And so that really was the initial root of our decision to bring me home, which took a lot of faith, honestly. It really was. It was like I would like to joke, we jumped out of the airplane before the parachute was made. We were sewing furiously on the way to the ground because we felt very clearly that the Lord had called me home. And yet I earned 3/4 of our income. So there was a significant we had to have a huge shift in our spending habits, in our priorities, in our willingness to dip into savings and kind of humble ourselves before we could even make the decision. Once it was made, though, we really felt that one thing that we had not learned well in the traditional education system was how to actually choose a career that matched our bent. But it talks in the scriptures about train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. That's a bent scripture that talks about lead them in the path of who they already are, and they'll be strong in that path because they know their identity. They know how the Lord has made them. And so that was very important to my husband and me. Now we have a much longer list of why we homeschool, things like time together, building strong relationships, really getting to dig into the Bible as a family. But the initial reason was the exact same thing that I was struggling with to begin with, which is how can we help our children leave the education, leave our school, leave homeschooling, leave high school, go into college, knowing who they are and what they're good at, so that they can actually not go through the pain that my husband and I did of this identity crisis of who am I and what should I be doing?
Yeah, I think that is one of the big gaps right now in schooling, is that kids, especially now when there's so much focus on college, there's so many kids who come out who feel like, "Oh, I must go to college because that's what you
Mhm.
do when you leave high school." And their bent may be mechanics, where they
Yes.
could go directly into a trade school and be working within a few years, fully loving using their hands and what they do, and they don't
Mhm.
need to sit through a history class to figure that out. It's one of those things where we have made this formula of what it looks like to be successful. And in that formula, we've stripped people of their ability to actually connect with how God has made them. I do love that you put a huge focus, however, on that whole entrepreneurship journey and
Mhm.
how it enriches and interconnects with our faith. And I think when you are trying to help a child understand, or an adult at that, for that matter, anyone
Right.
understand their bent, their way of being that God has, that those intrinsic gifts and talents and things that He's placed inside of them, entrepreneurship almost forces those things to the forefront. How did you go from being a corporate lawyer to then a homeschooling mom to then think, you know what? I need to add something else to this, and
Yeah.
I'm going to start an entrepreneurial journey?
Very reluctantly is the short answer. So I really when I left law, I did so with an understanding that as long as I was an employee somewhere, I really was sacrificing my time for money. And there was a wonderful book, it's a secular book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki that digs into this contrast between being an employee or self-employed versus being an entrepreneur or investor, a business owner. And so I read the book. I was like, this makes so much sense. This is great. We'll be investors. And I was like, I need to teach my children to be entrepreneurs, but I will not do it myself. So that was my thought at the time, which, of course, if you want to hear God laugh, we all know we tell him our plans. And it came about where we needed income for me to be able to stay home with our children long term. And as much as I'd said, I will never be an entrepreneur because it felt too risky. As a former lawyer, I love the boxes. I love the scripts. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And working outside of the box really felt scary. The desire to be home with my children was greater, and also it's once you see the power of a path, it's hard to continually refuse to walk down it. And so I really just took the leap of faith and started with a small, relatively simple direct sales business, which I really do love that model because it helps you walk into entrepreneurship in a way that it takes a lot of the free fall out of it, so to speak. You're starting with a product, you're starting with a marketing plan, you're starting with training and support and a team to be a part of. And so I will always be a huge advocate for that model. It got my feet wet. And then from there, I realized there's still a lot I love about this model, but there's also other things that I want to create. And now I'm brave enough to go and do it. So it was an iterative process. I've now been in entrepreneurship for almost 10 years. But I love what you said, that it really does call us to engage with our true gifts before the Lord in a way that we can't hide from it. If we don't know what our gifts are, if we don't know how He made us and the bent, the things that we're called to bring into the world, we really can't operate in the entrepreneurial space effectively because we don't know what we're sharing about and how we differ from someone else in the marketplace. So it deepens our faith in such a beautiful way.
Yes, and I think I would 100% agree with you in that so many women, when they are first launching out into an entrepreneurial journey, most of them are just like you described, just like you and I were. It's, I don't know if I really want to do this, God. This seems risky. Give me the safe
Yep.
path to this. That makes it a little bit easier. And I think that security that we want, which is why so many people do stay in a W-2 employee-based system, and there's nothing wrong with that if it's making you happy. But I think the reason so many people stay there is because it doesn't feel risky. It's very safe. Everything's taken care of for you. But I think some of us, that is part of the joy of the Lord, is that adventure. We actually, part of our faith being stretched is that adventure that comes with doing something, with stepping out on the water with Him. It's
Yeah.
going that little extra step above what feels safe simply because you feel like He's going to meet you there on the water. And so I know
Mhm.
for myself, one of the areas that I would love to hear your thoughts or your experience on is, as you mentioned with your family, you were making a large part of the income. And so it wasn't like you were making 1% of your family's income and
Yes.
it's, oh, I'm going to step down. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, we're not going to miss it. You said, I believe I heard you say you were making like 75%
Yes.
of
Yes, I
the
was.
family income. So that's a different story when you decide I'm
Mhm.
going to step down. And so I
Mhm.
know for some, so whether you are a woman who is contributing 1% to the family income or 75% of the family
Mhm.
income, I believe that all women have some level of responsibility to be participating in the growth, financial growth, and stability of their family. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
100%, yes, and actually the name of my own podcast, the social media handle I use is She Considers a Field, which is from Proverbs 31, where it says, "The righteous woman considers a field and she buys it." And it's an homage, it's an honor of that exact concept that you're talking about. When I first started staying home, I had a circle of friends around me that were solely homemakers, and that was their focus. And so I had incorrectly, I feel personally in my conviction, incorrectly assumed that they, first of all, had no engagement in their family finances. And second of all, that it was wrong for me to be doing anything financially because it felt like, oh, a real sometimes I don't know if this resonates for you, Saundra, like, we like to almost assume that righteousness is whatever we're not, if that makes sense. We're
Yes, I can understand that. Yeah.
Yes. So my lawyer bent, my hard driving, analytical, curious, intellectually engaged bent, I felt had led me to this path of dissatisfaction. And so I swung all the other way and I said, I'm not even leaving the house without my children. I will do nothing financial. I'm just going to stay home. And of course, I was miserable because that's not me. I'm curious. I'm engaged in the world. I like to read. I like to reason things out with people. And so to shut that piece of me off not only was a disservice to me, but it was a disservice to my family because now my husband was left holding the bag going, okay, we've got 75% of the income to make up. Like, where are you? You got to jump in here. And by God's grace, I did with a lot of guilt, honestly. I thought I was wrong. And so the past decade have been a real reckoning for me to recognize and own women very much do have a place in the financial stability of the family. That's a part of being a righteous woman is to show up and serve the family and be mindful of the family coffers, whether that is simply focusing on homemaking, not even simply, whether that is focusing on homemaking and having a grocery budget and knowing how to cook healthy meals on a limited income, or whether it's going out in the marketplace and doing a job of some kind or building a business. And so that I absolutely agree with you. That's something that we truly are called to do as women of faith. And it's something that I think needs to be brought into the conversation as you're doing as much as possible, because with this shift towards like I think they call it trad wife, the traditional women, we can eschew that as a value. And it's no, we're called to be in there too.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I am not about making anyone feel like for some of you, if you are homeschooling or not, and you feel like you're full time and you do not want to do any other outside things for finances with your family, and you are completely content and happy with that, may be where you need to be for a season. So
Hmm.
don't hear what we're not saying. You follow God as you follow God.
That's
But what
right.
I'm finding is that so often, as you just mentioned, women are in this position not because they feel like that is the season where they're in, where God is taking them deep into this time of family and kind of being set apart within the family and the home,
Mm.
but it's more so a guilt in that this is
Yes.
what I'm supposed to do. And this is what it really means to be a good mom, or this is what it really means to be family focused when it doesn't always look like that. There's so many ways to be family focused, and you can still have these other things that God has your hand in and that you're
Mhm.
doing, including entrepreneurship, homeschooling, working within the ministry. There's so many different ways. And so, one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship and that whole process is that it allows the creativity of God to really come forth in the financial stewardship and
Mm.
in the money-making process. I don't know specifically how you make income, but share a little bit about some of the ways someone who might be listening right now and thinking, "You know what? I do want to provide something within our budget as well." What are a couple of ideas of like home businesses or entrepreneurial first starts that women can take?
Yes. Oh, that's such a great question. So, first, I'll share a little fact that has been very orienting for me over the years, which is that the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. And so, if we think about when we come from a W 2 perspective, we have a job and we do a thing. And millionaires recognize, and that doesn't mean that we're all called to be wealthy, but I think that the Lord offers sufficiency for us, enough to meet our needs. And sometimes that's a call to get scrappy, to figure out how can I do that? So it's important, especially as busy women and women seeking to be faithful in the home, that we have our eyes open for not only streams of income that involve us actively trading our money for time, but also looking at how can I direct my attention to passive streams of income. So some examples would be finding ways to I mentioned direct sales before, and I have a wellness product that I represent. And so that I believe really is a very simple way to enter into the water and say, okay, I found a product. I love a product. I'm going to share about a product. making sure that the compensation plan allows you to do other things too and gives you that flexibility. And so that can be a way to start the ball moving so
Mhm.
that we start to feel this confidence of, I can do something. Then we look at, okay, what is it that people are always coming and asking me for? Is it that simple grain-free recipe guide? Is it how I manage my time with my children? Is it being intentional in my marriage? Is it how I healed from a loss that was really devastating? What are the things that I engage in conversations with regularly? And then how can I formalize that support as it's amazing what happens with even just a free guide to get people started or a really low dollar offer. Like when somebody, and I can't remember the exact statistics, but the likelihood of someone purchasing a high value item from you when they've spent $5 to $7 with you is astronomically higher than coming in cold with that higher offer to begin with. So you can warm people up by these low dollar offers and say, hey, I'm here. I'm adding value in the marketplace. Being mindful to put our money, one of the things that the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad talked about that I loved so much is he talks about putting our money into assets instead of liabilities. And I looked around as a lawyer at the time with a very significant coming in every couple of weeks, realizing everything I'm buying is defined as a liability, which is where it takes money out of your pocket instead of putting money in your pocket. So I was buying the shoes and the handbags and let's go out of town for a fun little trip. And realizing that the things that put money into my pocket are real estate investments and preferred stocks that pay dividends and doing dollar cost averaging, which is where you buy stocks periodically. Like every 2 weeks, I'm going to buy the same stock. I'm going to buy a mutual fund or an index fund over and over again so that the amount that you buy that one little stock at doesn't matter so much because you've bought it multiple times. So little habits like that to say, I'm going to put the money into things that will actually grow and compound instead of taking money out of my pocket. So those are a few things. I will say, I think the most important thing as we endeavor to do this to say, I'd like to earn some income. And I will just note too, if you already have training in something, if you have a degree in English literature and you become an editor, or you have for me, a law degree, one of the things in my back pocket is always doing contract work as a lawyer, dust off that law degree and start using it again. But the biggest thing I think, and this is where we can get lost, is we need to move our feet. So get on social media and start doing live videos talking about what you care about and see how it's shaped. Come guest on podcasts and start identifying your voice and your messaging. As we are faithful in the little things, God sets us over more. And that includes moving from I share what I have to offer for free into paid opportunities. So we just need to get moving and start doing the thing.
I love that. And I think that is exactly the word to focus on. You just have to get started with something.
Yes.
Do something. God can't make a seed grow you won't even put into ground. So
Yes.
take whatever little bit of whatever you think you do or know or can share and bring it as a seed form and just begin somewhere to start with that entrepreneurial idea or business or side project or side hustle. There's so many words
Mhm.
that people use. Really, when it comes down to a service, they're all forms of service. Whatever tag you want to put on it, you're basically serving someone with your gifts and your talents. And for that service you're rendering, someone is valuing it and exchanging value in the form of income. And so I think sometimes we get all caught up in the sales and the transactional part of it, the money transactional part of it, without realizing there's a spiritual transactional part of it, and that your gift is not meant for you to just sit on, and it's not meant for you to just hoard and not share. That every gift has been given as every gifting is really given as a gift to be given away. And
That's
so
right.
having opportunities to do that, and in your honoring the gift and giving it away, people honor you by
Mhm.
giving you revenue in whatever form that may look. So I love the
Right.
way that you share that with so many. Anna, I want to make sure people know how to connect with you and how to learn more about your trainings and all the different things that you're doing.
Yes. So I have a podcast called She Considers a Field, and it's this conversation. It's how can we steward well the gifts that we've been given and deepen our intimacy with the Lord as well, because the two go hand in hand. I also have a free guide that I will give you the link, and they'll be in the show notes or wherever you put your links, called From Overwhelmed to Overcomer. And that's a great guide if you're in this kind of mental muddle and going, I don't know where to start. I don't know what's next. It's a great way to clear the clutter and get really clear on here's my next action step. So those are a couple things I have going on, and I look forward to connecting with your people. Feel free to contact me on Instagram as well. I'm here to serve and support, just like you talked about, Dr. Saundra.
Excellent. We're chatting with Anna McLaughlin, and I want to make sure that you can get in contact with her also on social media. So we're going to include her links within the show notes, as well as a link to her resource that she just mentioned. Until next time, everyone, live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally.